is Hard Pass, an analysis of press coverage of the top political story of the day. White House correspondent Brian Karam and university journalism professors Dr. Michael Myra and Dr. Mark Meaderson host Hard Pass. In this episode, Smoke on the Water, the team will be looking at the sinking of a suspected Venezuelan drug boat by the United States Navy. Here's an NBC News report about the incident.
I would love to leave behind right-wing fundamentalists and Christian nationalists who use Jesus, whose birth we celebrate, as a prop while legislating and fighting against his actual teachings. There's a lot of right-wing brothers and sisters in this country who identify as Christian, and they care about the manger and the crucifix, and they ignore the 30 years of teaching.
33.
Well, actually 3 years of teaching he did in between. Jesus is not an ally of the Republican Party. There is no overlap between Jesus and the policies of Donald Trump. In South Carolina, they tried to have a bill this year calling for the death penalty for abortion. We're so pro-life, we'll kill you. That's where we're at right now.
That's Stephen Wright. I would kill for a Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah.
Seeing the Pope this week enrage these right-wing Christians so much because he acted like Jesus in blessing gay unions.
Yep.
Jesus is not anti-immigrant. He commands people to welcome the stranger. He never mentions abortion. The Bible never condemns abortion. We've had 2 generations of Christians in this country who have been groomed to believe criminalizing abortion is something to do with what Jesus talked about. Christ was a peaceful, radical, nonviolent revolutionary, never mentioned gay people. He commanded you to pay your taxes, to welcome the stranger. Individuals and nations must care for the poor and sick in Matthew 25. He who lives by the sword must die by the sword, Luke 22. There's a reason why these right-wingers never try to put the Sermon on the Mount on walls in classrooms.
Thank God somebody read the Bible.
Wow, just before Jesus' birthday, you're delivering.
Listen, I'm the child of an ex-nun and an ex-Franciscan.
Oh, wow.
And if you want to criminalize abortion and put people in jail because you're so Christian, when Jesus never mentioned abortion, but you support the death penalty, which Christ actually opposed, the rest of us...
a lot of men wrote the books,
you know. But if you support those things, then the rest of us aren't obliged to take your claims of Christian piety seriously anymore. And the media is to blame because the media loves a bad guy and has made the Falwells and the Robertsons pass for what Christianity is for a generation. It's time to take the Bible back from the hypocrites and thugs.
I'm Mark Meaderson, journalism PhD and assistant professor of electronic media at Texas State University. Welcome to Hard Pass. Before we get to our esteemed guest today, with me as always, Dr. Michael Myra, journalism PhD, assistant professor of communications at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Michael, is the doctor in?
I'm here and I am watching every word that I say, given the attention focused on what professors have to say these days.
Absolutely. Also, White House correspondent Brian Karam. Brian, I'm just going to say hi at this point because so much has happened since our last episode that we need to talk about.
Hello, not hi yet, but maybe later.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, Mr. Karam.
Hello.
We have a very special guest today. He hosts a nightly show on Sirius XM. He performs comedy and does it quite well. And in his spare time, he's a best-selling author as well. John Fugelsang is with us to talk about our usual stuff, media and politics, but also to talk about his newly released book, Separation of Church and Hate. Mr. Fugelsang, welcome to Hard Pass.
Thank you, Professor, Doctor, and Brian.
2 professors and a reporter walked into a bar.
Yeah, the professor, the doctor, and Brian. Thank you all for having me.
There you go.
I didn't know that you and Mr. Karam went back so fast. This is amazing to me.
Yeah, all the way to high school.
Wow, thank you all so much for having me.
Honestly, everything on here is old Kentucky jokes. So just be ready for that.
And we passed, we passed the bourbon after the show.
Right on. I just had Andy Bashir on my show last week. He came in.
Nice.
We just did a 1-hour live call-in special last week.
How'd that go, by the way?
It was a lot of fun. He brought his wife and his 2 kids with him, and they're running his podcast on Progress, but he's going to do a few of these live specials, and sometimes I sort of sidekick, like I did it for Richard Branson a few years ago. Like they're the star, but I'm the host, and so I just set it all up and welcome people from commercial breaks and stuff like that. But he was delightful, and he certainly knows what he is doing, and he certainly is building an interesting foundation for the next couple of years.
Yeah, which leads to, well, we'll get on to that another show where we know it's obviously headed to. John, can you tell the listeners about your new book, which is subtitled?
I'd love to.
It's subtitled A Sane Person's Guide to taking the Bible back from fundamentalists, fascists, and flock-fleecing frauds, which is not easy for a host to say. Besides the wonderful alliteration, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, this is a book for everybody of every religious background and every religion, every atheist, every agnostic, anybody who's ever going to have to deal with a far right-wing Christian nationalist or fundamentalist or Christian extremist or whatever we're calling them these days. Whatever umbrella term works. Like millions, I was raised to believe that Christianity was about the stuff Jesus talked about, welcoming the stranger, individuals and nations caring for the poor and sick as commanded in Matthew 25, being against the death penalty, turning the other cheek, forgiving people. And then I, like millions, grew up to find that in this country, it almost seemed like that movement of peace was hijacked by a bunch of self-serving, tax-free grifters and televangelists with blow-dried hair and former segregationists. I was a kid when Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson were dominating the headlines, and that was the beginning of systemically changing American Christianity for 2 generations, of getting conservative Christians to throw out everything Jesus ever talked about, to criminalize abortion, which Jesus and the Bible never talk about. And as I got older, I began realizing that, actually, my mom and dad, who were ex-clergy, I was abnormally Christian. My mother was a nun before she married. She was a nurse and worked with lepers in Malawi, Africa. My father was a Franciscan brother who wore the Jedi robes and taught history to boys in Catholic boys in Brooklyn. And my father was someone who worshipped Gandhi and Dorothy Day and Dr. King. And as I grew up and got further away from the church, I realized, my parents were right. Jesus really is not on the side of his right-wing fan clubs on virtually every issue. And I got tired of seeing my parents' faith used as a cover for meanness. The right wing uses Christianity as a cloaking device, as a camouflage, to pass policies that are against the gospel teachings of Jesus while loudly boasting of their piety and waving Jesus around like a prop. So I wrote this book for anybody who has to deal with one of these people to use the Bible when debating them on all scripture, because these folks are trying to force their narrow version of Christianity on the rest of society. And it's going to take a lot of us elegantly disarming their piety by showing they don't really follow the book. They have weaponized to claim power. This is a movement that does not fight for the teachings of Jesus. They do not fight for religious freedom. They want power. And whatever they must believe in to get it, they will. It's a very long answer to your very short question.
No. Speak as much as you like. Michael.
Yeah. So, John, we're so glad to have you here. You agreed to do this, I think, Monday last week, and obviously a lot changed on Wednesday when Charlie Kirk was shot. He seems like somebody who's very tied in to kind of this discussion that you were having.
Indeed.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about, do you see Charlie Kirk as sort of an example of where he fits in this constellation of people you've been talking about?
He fits in it where the rest of the Republican Party is. I would ask anyone to go try to find one teaching of Christ from the Gospels that Charlie Kirk or Turning Point USA or Donald Trump or the MAGA movement or the Republican Party have fought for legislatively in this century. I'd say one teaching of Jesus that Charlie Kirk will be remembered for fighting for. They don't fight for the teachings of Jesus. They fight for conservative Christian domination. And I have many thoughts about Charlie Kirk. He's someone who came at me. Well, we can, I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but I would say he was, well, yeah. Obviously he's an exemplary example of this movement that spiritual people use religion to try to become better people, right? Fundamentalists use religion to prove they're better people than you. And that's what the whole movement was based about, spiritual superiority. Jesus's mission and movement was all about humility, modeling servant leadership, putting the least first. How are you going to help those below you? That explains the Beatitudes. That explains Matthew 25. This movement is about beating up people who are below you, be they the Christian refugees at our border that we smear as illegals, be they the transgender children that Jesus commands us to love and treat as we treat him, but they make a useful scapegoat because the Muslims don't focus group as well for easily scapegoatable minorities this decade. And here's the tragedy, right? Charlie Kirk, I don't need to list off all the racist things he said. I don't need to list off all the terrible, bigoted, anti-woman, the awful things he said about black women and other religions. I mean, today, he called Leviticus God's perfect law, the portion where it said you must stone gay people to death. Charlie Kirk doesn't follow Leviticus. No Christian does. Leviticus was written for the Hebrews fleeing the bondage. It's how to keep your tribes up, for numbers up, for 40 years in the desert with no antibiotics or Wi-Fi or air conditioning. It's not directed at Christians. But Jesus commands you to love the gays. They don't like woke Jesus, so they'll go to that one line in Leviticus, shall not lie with a man. That's an abomination. Leviticus 20:10 commands you to stone adulterers to death. I don't hear stoning Donald Trump to be called God's perfect law. So they don't even believe or follow these chapters. They weaponize to hurt other people. And the great tragedy that I haven't heard talked about yet is that now Charlie's gone. And all those people that don't know his racist quotes, they'll know him by the end of this week. In fact, his racist statements are going to become exponentially so much more famous for the next several decades, and it will dog his obituary ever. And he's never going to have a chance to grow up and change it. Charlie Kirk is never going to have a chance to have a black friend or a gay friend or a trans friend or an immigrant friend who opens his heart, expands his mind. He's never going to watch Trumpism fail. He's never going to get to lose a lot of debates and maybe grow from the experience, lose some funding, and have to struggle a bit rather than just getting paid for telling white folks what they want to hear. He's never going to get a chance to become a decent man because of another faceless coward with a gun, another 20-something white Republican raised around guns, Christian male having easy access to weaponry. And because of that, this guy never gets to grow. And so, again, there's better people than me documenting all the grievous things he said. But the deification of this man, you know why they're doing it. They're terrified. They're already trying to rig it in Texas 15 months early before the midterms. They're trying to exploit this like they exploited Benghazi. Ask them the names of any of the 4 men from Benghazi. They don't need those names anymore. They don't remember those guys, but they use the corpse. They use the murder victims to get more power, and we should expect a lot of that right now.
Brian.
I'm sorry, that was a very, very long, preachy answer.
No. John, you have this conversation, more than once. And what you said, I'll just go. This is something that I said in a column last week. I said, he deserved the chance to grow, change his mind, raise his kids, love his family, and do so in an environment that tolerated his opinions while offering him better options. Now he is a silent martyr for those who have their own agendas. And what I find, I go back to Luke 6:46, and you quoted in your book as well. There are those who say they follow Jesus, but don't do anything that Jesus actually did.
Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?
Yes. And there in Leviticus, I find that to be demonstrably one of the case in point. It's Leviticus. It's not the New Testament. It's not Jesus.
But again, they don't follow Leviticus. Leviticus is one of many chapters in the Hebrew scriptures where God tells the Israelites that they are commanded to welcome the stranger and treat the alien as one of their own. Jesus comes along as kid. Matthew 25 says individuals and nations will be judged by how they welcome the stranger. And as we've discussed, Brian, I'm not saying you shouldn't have limitations on who comes into the country. It's the criminalization of migrants, calling them illegals, and all this racism. If they wanted to stop the border crossings, they'd lock up the people doing the hiring. They're not doing that. It's all a scam. Right. So I just will say to these people all the time, and I wrote this book because I think don't argue with them. Make them argue with God. Say, God commands it, Jesus commands it. So why should I listen to Donald Trump and you and reject God and Jesus? Make them debate the scripture.
When you're talking to people, and I've had this discussion with a lot of MAGA people about how they, asking them to show me one example, as you said. And I'm going to get you in the White House to ask that question of a couple of people we've talked about. And I'm going to get you into Congress to ask that of the Speaker of the House.
I always ask, give me one teaching of Christ or commandment that Donald Trump's fought for. Just one. Just give me one. And they can't do it.
The one of the things that I don't want to diminish is the fact that in reading your book, man, it did make me laugh. Great sense of humor.
Most of
And
these books don't have dick jokes, so thank you for that. That was something I had to convince Simon and Schuster that there was a void in the market.
Is that
for that.
what it was?
I don't use the word exegesis, but there are dick jokes. Yes, so that's my contribution. Thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry. There are at least some fart jokes, though, right?
No, I'm afraid none of that. No, I'm not. Wait, I'm sorry, sir. I have standards. No, I'm not. That's lowbrow. Go to Newsmax for that, sir. Go to Newsmax for that. No, but yes, thank you. There's a lot of comedy had to be cut out of it. That was the first stuff to go.
Well,
thank you.
But to the people who don't understand, and the people who are going to pick up this book and go, hey, I want to learn a little bit about it. What's the most important message that you think they should take from it? And other than the fact that they don't support Jesus, what is it positive that you want them to take from the Bible experience?
Well, there's two things I'll say. The good news is you don't have to be a dick to gay people. You don't have to persecute poor women who are pregnant and want to terminate. The good news is you don't have to persecute people who have terminated pregnancies, because the Bible never tells you to do that. And in Exodus 21, God asserts a fetus is property, and a woman's life has more value in his eye. You don't have to persecute gay people or trans people ever again. I know a lot of Christians don't want to do that, but the Bible says I have to, like Nuremberg with bad teeth. Well, guess what? Jesus commands you to treat the lowest of the low as you treat him. And in Matthew 19, he pretty much says gay men are born that way. For so many reasons, I'll say the good news is you don't have to be a dick. He wants you to be nice to people. Congratulations, right wing. And I'll just say, if your church is not telling you to love your enemy, but it's telling you who your enemy is, you're not really in a church. And that's the message of this book.
So, but all right, and give it to me about the fan fiction, the critic who became part of the Bible, Saul who became Paul.
Well, okay, so in a lot of these small C Christians, they don't like woke Jesus, so they got to go back to the Hebrew scriptures where there's a lot of great stuff, but again, Jesus brought a new covenant, right? New covenant, you get to have bacon, you get to have your foreskin, all that. So, or they'll go to Paul, Jesus' uptight PR guy, who is not Jesus, but these are the Jesus loopholes. Never met him. But these are the loopholes. So when someone says, some homophobic thing, it's either going to be Leviticus or maybe Deuteronomy, or it's going to be Paul's letter to Romans, maybe Paul's letter to Corinthians and Timothy as well. So Paul is this guy who was a persecutor of, you guys know, I'll do it really quick. He persecuted Christians. And then he had his road to Damascus moment, and he became a Christian and changed his name. And because Paul was a Pharisee and a Roman citizen, he could travel all through the Roman Empire and sell his version of the Jesus movement, which was keep your foreskin, eternal forgiveness, have some bacon. Meanwhile, Jesus's followers, who were actually Jewish, Jesus had a Jewish movement, they were all getting killed by Paul's friends back home. So Paul's version lasted because he could go all over the empire while the apostles all got martyred back there. So Paul wrote all these letters, and, Jesus was the guy. Paul was the ideas man, hierarchy, structure. Paul poured his contempt of women into it. He poured his uptightness about guys with guys into it. And then Paul writes to Timothy one day and says, hey, the Hebrew scriptures, all scriptures God breathed, because God's responsible for it, right? It's the Hebrew scriptures. And then Paul dies. 300 years later, Rome takes over, and the Council of Nicaea creates the religion, one creed to rule them all, and they decide Paul's letters to Timothy about Scripture are now Scripture. So when Paul says all Scripture is God-breathed, that means every single part of the Bible is absolutely true, even if they contradict each other, even if you don't really believe that you should execute someone for working on a Saturday. And so this is called quoting Paul to justify Paul, and they all do it. They don't know the Jesus parts, these MAGA friends. They will quote any other part of the Bible and think it's all interchangeable because, hey, it's in the Bible somewheres.
Why do you think Christianity, and I work in an academic environment, right? There are definitely people with criticisms of religion going, its role in oppression. Why do you think Christianity has been such a fruitful tool, organizing tool for sort of the political conservative wing of the Republican Party?
Well, because they've always had a very convenient version of it. I think there's two histories of this movement, and one is the Christians and one is the Christ followers. And very often those are circles that don't overlap in the Venn diagram. And there is an incredible history of Christian activism. And it's always been in response to Christian authoritarianism. So Rome does the Crusades, and now the little movement that was oppressed is big enough to oppress others. And they create all this military Jesus nonsense and Deus Volt and all this crap that's a rejection of Jesus's entire message. But we're doing it for Jesus, and that's where they began, saying it's okay if we kill people because we'll convert them forcibly. And if the Indians and the slaves taught us anything, being saved didn't save them. So it was St. Francis who quit the military and preached against war. And then the doctrine of discovery, and the Pope says, go and rape other lands and steal their resources and torture them and rape them, but convert them. And Columbus is slaughtering the Taino people in the shadow of the cross. And it was the Catholic priest on his boat, Bartolomeo de las Casas, that protested formally to Spain of the treatment of the indigenous people. First act of protest by a white person in this hemisphere, Catholic priest. Slavery was propped up by the Bible, the gospel of the story of Ham, which I go deep into in the Bible, and different verses that were bastardized to justify conquest. None of them came from Jesus again. And it was the Jesus followers like Harriet Tubman and the Quakers and Frederick Douglass who pushed back. And of course, Christianity propped up segregation. It was Martin Luther King, the Baptist minister, who led the way shaming white American Christianity with their own book. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Christians who released the Christian nationalism of Hitler. I mean, we've seen this in the labor movement where Christianity endorsed all this exploitation, but Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement demanded an end to child labor and a 5-day work week. I mean, think about in our last 30 years, how many people we've seen talk their parents and grandparents out of so much homophobia. The whole history is the batshit Christians ruining everything, and the true Jesus followers, with their allies, not all of whom are Christian, always having to beat back the batshit ones.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. It's one of the things that I've always, the pure rejection of like Christianity and conservatism, like is that I'm Jewish, so that's never really been my question. I'm an Old Testament guy,
right on.
Guy myself.
That's why you're so sane and well-adjusted, I might add.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I tried to convert. I grew up on Long Island. I tried to convert when I was 15. My rabbi said I was too neurotic for the Jews.
No, we've got our calm, even-handed vision of God, I think is my understanding, right?
Well, I mean, I actually think that's true, because Jesus, we don't teach Jesus as a first century Jew who experienced God in a very different way of getting out there and living and being a mensch and doing good deeds. And that's how you experience God. When the Greeks translate it all, then it's Zeus, invisible guy with lightning bolts, far away, angry, alcoholic step god. And I think the translations took away a lot of the real spirit of Christ's Jewishness that animated his ministry, not misery. That's my Jewish aunt. That's my Aunt Fabissina. That's my Aunt Fabissina with the misery.
I was going to say, what was interesting is in the Jewish tradition I was raised in, they talk about sort of an underground tradition and the dominant tradition where, there was the people who I guess became the Pharisees, right, were the sort of the dominant tradition. You still had this sort of underground tradition that fought against this kind of intense domination, the sort of the use of religious language and religious ideas to justify, I don't say imperial projects, but justify sort of oppressive projects. And it seems to me that what you're saying is that this has existed for, there's a long history of this in Christianity as well. That's very interesting to hear that.
Well, I mean, I find that so interesting because, Jesus's movement was one of these movements. I mean, to think that Judaism in the Holy Land at 1 BC, 1 AD was somehow a monolith. I mean, you had the violent resistance, you had the ascetics out in the desert who were just, living for God. Then you had the people just going through their daily lives. And one of the big things I learned in writing this was how we've come a long way, the world, in not blaming the Jews for the Holocaust anymore. It took a couple thousand years, but we've come a long way, most of us. But we still, I realize I'm guilty of this. Pharisees has become like a synonym, a generic term to describe authoritarian religious bosses. And I used it my whole life as a contemptuous slur, you Pharisees, for anyone who's a big phony and more focused on the letter of the law than actual love. And I realized that that's terrible, because this is the origin of rabbinic culture. And it was actually only a small minority of the Pharisees that did this. Jesus himself was probably a Pharisee. He was friends with Pharisees like Nicodemus. We see him all the time, like he's in Simon the Pharisee's house having dinner the night the lady comes and weeps on his feet. Like he hung with these guys. They were his peers. They weren't his enemies. It was a small group of Pharisees who were ultra-Orthodox and conservative, who were threatened by this revolutionary Jewish sect. And it was one of the most important things I learned, because I'm guilty of using that expression casually. And when doing so, I was kind of slamming, the origins of rabbi culture. So like I learned a lot in writing this. And in so many ways, it's because we're not taught anything about Jesus's time. And, they teach us that he lived under European military occupation in Judea before any of us are old enough to understand what that means.
Brian, I know over the weekend when we were talking about this episode, you had some ideas.
I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't there.
you
Look this up. Go ahead.
As the newspaper guy, you said there's a much bigger story. You want to ask John about that story
Oh, is that well, first I was going to say
the Diddy verdict. Are we finally going to talk about Diddy again? Is it finally?
Well, I was going to say when I got to Finland, I got accosted by a friend of mine who's a very conservative Jewish guy, and he to Finland to me. I had to put that thing around my head, and because my grandmother was on my mother's side was Jewish, and so I sat down. He said, "Look, after we're done," he said, "Did he have any questions for me?" I said, "Well, I'll ask you the same question that I asked my priest when I was confirmed." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Yeah, God sees everything. God knows everything. God is everywhere, right?" And he goes, "Of course." I said, "Then what do I need you for?" And the rabbi looked at me and he goes, "What do you need me for?" And I said, that's a better answer than I got from the priest.
Nice.
But I had to bring that up. So, but the story that's been bothering me as a reporter this week is, all right, so Russia overflew first Poland with drones, then Romania.
Oh, it was a mistake. Donald Trump said it was a mistake. All 19 times. All 19 times it was a mistake. Yes.
Yeah.
Don't be worried, America. Donald says 19 mistakes. Go on.
So only 19 times.
Only 19 times
here
it
we
happened.
are after that, with Donald Trump still playing the Putin chord, that it's not my war, it was Biden's and Zelensky's. But hell, he got invaded. So that to me is the bigger story, and I find that we're on a path, but we're ignoring. If we ignore everything, and we seem to be, and concentrating on
you think Putin bombing Poland or flirting with bombing Poland is the important story more so than right-wing political violence, which this assassination seems to be?
I think this is potentially far greater.
I think so too.
People
calling Trump Hitler don't realize two things: A, Trump doesn't believe in anything, and B, Putin's Hitler.
Putin's the one.
Yeah.
And this is frightening me, because I've been outside of the country, and most people believe that Donald Trump and the far right and the Christian right are charlatans.
Yes.
And that Putin is playing them.
They are. And so the far right in Russia, by the way, as well. I mean, the patriarch can't stop praising the slaughter of Ukrainian civilians in the name of Jesus.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. I get mad at the press for how we're covering this. And while I find the right-wing extremist depressing and disgusting, and in part, I know it's deflection, but it is also an attempt by Donald Trump to show his strong hand, that, he wants to be a strong-handed man.
But he's looking like an idiot to everybody. I mean, to everybody except the 32% that doesn't watch the news but is blindly obedient. I mean, what happened in Alaska was shameful. And if a Republican had pulled that in the 80s, they'd be unemployable for the rest of their career.
Dude,
I mean,
and
it was so humiliating.
You bring up Alaska. What happened? What has happened since Alaska?
Donald Trump has been proven to have been everybody who had to go up to Alaska for that photo op. I hope they enjoyed the trip, because it was a complete waste of time. There's never going to be a deal. Putin does not want peace. Putin wants Ukraine because Ukraine is not a real country. It belongs to Russia, the end. So this is all just a lot of prick waving with Donald Trump tap dancing to pretend he's got a solution, when the only solution to this is either Vladimir Putin decides to end what he started, or, these Russians have a way of self-correcting every few years.
Yeah, well, and they
I
self-corrected
mean,
out of
when's Vladimir going to get his polonium smoothie, if you know what I mean?
Yes, well, or
when's he going to accidentally fall out a window, right? Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Whoops, he fell out that hotel.
When's an RPG going to accidentally hit his plane? I mean, my God.
I looked at it, and when he showed up in Alaska, he went and paid, this is Putin, mind you, went and paid tribute to the Russian soldiers that had fallen in Alaska.
Listen, you know, the whole limo ride, the whole limo ride was done because that was the only time in the entire time in Alaska that he was alone with Trump without anybody present. That's why the limo ride happened. Like this whole thing stinks like Chris Christie's hamper, and the media doesn't want to talk about it because they'd rather chase down gossip about dead pedophiles, which I admit is important for the future.
Yes, I agree. I find it disgusting and disarming, and for me, at the end of the day, far more important on the future of the planet. It's an existential threat to all of us.
I agree.
Yeah, I had to ask that.
Now that we're all depressed, Brian. Thanks. Yeah. Now that we're all
John.
No, but you're right. But again, you know, also remember something. Like, these guys are all really bad at it. I mean, Putin killed 50,000 Russians to take Chechnya. At some point, the Russian people, I think, are going to get tired of this at some point. I mean, but they're at this point sending every prisoner in North Korea there to be cannon fodder. And these Ukrainians are not going to be giving up. These Ukrainians don't care what Donald Trump tells Vladimir Putin, and Ukraine is like the breakup victim learning to get along without her ex. They will learn how to get along without us, and then in 2029, when the United States takes its rightful place with NATO, let's just hope that they do a little bit more to have truth and reconciliation than they did after the Civil War, or after Iran-Contra, or after the Iraq War, or via Merrick Garland.
Well, John, you're right. When I was in Ukraine, I can tell you from being there that these people are not giving up.
Never.
You could burn the country down, and they'll still be there.
Exactly. And Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't believe in anything except, him.
They have big posters. They have huge banners that say, "This is our land. We live on it. The Russians can live under it." So they're gonna bury them.
Yeah.
And they don't get it. And so I find this frustrating on so many.
Well, it's a good thing that America is abandoning so many overseas trading partners so Russia can run in there, pick up the slack, and get a lot more revenue as they're bleeding themselves dry on this. Because it's going to be expensive for a long time.
That was done on purpose?
No. Listen, I don't say that Donald Trump is a plant. I say, what would a Russian plant do differently? What would someone who had compromat, who was sent here to destabilize our institutions, what would that person do differently? And I mean, maybe they think these tariffs are going to look good in 6 months, but oh boy, it's just this Epstein thing. This Epstein thing is like the Kardashians. It's never going away. Never.
No, and it's his people who want it more than any, because he sold the conspiracy.
Yeah, but again, and it's them pushing all the violence. I mean, they're trying to blame this horrible assassination on the annoying woke gun control people, the people who keep saying we got to make it harder to kill people with guns. It's their fault. I mean, it's going to be a really messy year and a half until these midterms get here, because they're scared now.
You have faith in those?
In what?
The midterms.
I have faith in the incompetency of these people. I have faith that the sinister is always greater than the evil. I call them dim shady, because the dumb is always greater than the malevolence. I mean, this with Bush and Cheney. At the end of the day, Bush and Cheney were just too goddamn dumb to pull it all off. And these guys too. I mean, you don't invade Russia in the winter. You don't invade Iraq and predict they'll greet you as liberators. I mean, come on. And you don't have these tariffs when every economist tells you not to, while getting people ginned up about a pedophile file for 8 years and then tell them they're crazy to want to see it. Like, you got these people hooked on the Kool-Aid, and now you're mad they want to drink. This guy and the media, that what will save Trump is the media. If Nixon had Fox News, he would have slammed the door in Barry Goldwater's face and never resigned. The media is going to the media still doesn't talk about the kid who tried to kill Trump last year, the Republican kid with the Republican gun. We've learned you remember his name? Anybody? We've learned nothing about that.
We don't talk about
brush it away, just like they're going to brush away that this was more
right wing on right wing crime. It would appear right now to be that. We had to deal with the lie for 2 days that this guy had a trans roommate. I mean, the lie comes out and the mainstream media runs with the lie for days because Donald Trump is crack and clickbait for these people.
Yes.
And they will eagerly run rumors they know to be lies to get the clicks, to have eyeballs see the ads. So then they can run a correction a few days later and maybe get a few more clicks on top of that. And that's the guiding morality.
Do they even know who the Democratic representative was in Minnesota 2 months ago?
No, they don't care. It doesn't serve them. That's why they don't know the names of the Benghazi Four. They never needed it. And as soon as Trump was sworn in 2017, we never heard the word Benghazi again. They don't care about abortion. If they wanted abortions to stop, they'd fight for birth control, be more accessible, and sex ed in the schools. They want the issue for power. They don't care about illegal immigration. Trump's hired them since the 80s. If they wanted border crossings to stop, they'd make it a 1 year in jail felony if you hire a nanny or anybody. They don't want it to stop. They want the power. They'll use the issue.
The point is, though, and this goes back to, this is the reason why I first went to Washington, D.C., the Simpson-Mazzoli Act in 1985. It was not illegal to hire them, though it was illegal they came across. They made it illegal and a felony to hire them, and it has not been used once.
And go back and
years.
Look at the 1980 debates of Reagan and Bush Sr. competing to see who could be more compassionate to the undocumented immigrants, because back then, that was how you got power. Now, crucifying them and treating them as unhuman and calling them vermin is how you get power.
I think
same party, 45 years.
I think there's a biblical precedent, my brother.
There's a precedent in German, too.
There's a book we should be reading. It's called The Separation of Church and State.
And let's get back to that book.
I'm sorry, Professor and Doctor. This man gets me so worked up. I get monologuing like a Bond villain. I'm sorry.
In your MSNBC...
We look for it in classrooms, so it's great. I'm enjoying it. Let other people talk.
God bless.
In the MSNBC appearance we played at the top of the episode, you talk about the Sermon on the Mount. In 2023 on NPR, Russell Moore, the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today magazine, said multiple pastors told him the same story about quoting the Sermon on the Mount in their preaching, mainly the turn the other cheek part. And congregants would come up after and say, "Where did you get those liberal talking points?" Moore noted when pastors would say, "I'm literally quoting Jesus Christ," the response would not be, "I apologize." The response would be, "Yes, but that doesn't work anymore."
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, why has the belief in what you call the warrior bro dude Jesus become salient as the symbol of right-wing Christians today?
Because it's more convenient. Caring about these dregs, caring about the less fortunate, not hating your enemies, that sucks. I mean, I want to believe
the Bible.
I want a religion that tells me I'm better than everybody. I want a religion that tells me that all I got to do is accept this dead guy as my savior and I get to go to heaven. And it doesn't matter how racist or cruel I am to others. That's a convenient little sign. Where do I sign for it? I get eternal glory and God likes me better than Jews or Muslims or American Indians or Hindus. And all I got to do is say I accept Jesus and ignore his teachings, and I can still enjoy executions and persecute gay people and migrants and be a cretin to women. I mean, come on. Like they don't follow Jesus because they worship him, and worshiping him is a lot easier than following his inconveniently liberal teachings. It's almost like they'd crucify him again if he came here with the same exact message. So I wrote this book for everybody I wrote this book for everybody who knows better, everybody who's ever watched these people on Fox News and said, Jesus Christ, these people are the opposite of Jesus Christ. You don't need to believe in the Bible as literal fact to use it in civil, nonviolent debate to take the narrative back from these people. And I find very often in family situations, they might appreciate that you took the time to engage using the Holy Book instead of just calling them superstitious names.
Well, and it's kind of reminiscent of what's happening today. You can use the words of somebody and actually get in trouble for it, it seems like.
Yes, you can. If you're a black woman working for the Post, you sure can.
Yes.
So, and you talk about the mythical uncle that people who read your book can use this to argue with. Talk about that just a little bit before we...
uncle, you know the guy who comes over for Thanksgiving and he's still mad about Pride Month and it's November. That guy, you've all got him. The one who's a lot more angry about Colin Kaepernick's knee
than Derek Chauvin's knee. You know the uncle I'm talking about. These are the guys who put up a tree in their house once a year, and that means God likes me better than you. And we all have these people, these spiritual narcissists, and it affects every class level in our society. There's poor spiritual narcissists and wealthy ones as well. They're not interested in anything Jesus actually talked about. They're interested in power and being better than you. And it's so boring. And again, over the years, I've come to believe that the number one growing religious group isn't Mormons or Islam, which we're always told, or even none of the aboves. I've come to think the top religious group are people who were raised religious and now consider themselves spiritual because they're so turned off to all this hypocrisy and meanness. You don't get to be mean to people who gay people and then say you follow Jesus. I mean, the only thing Donald Trump and Jesus have in common is they hung out with hookers and used ghostwriters. That's it. So this is a book for anyone, even atheists, because atheists have people in their family who they love. And these people are nationalists. They're our family and our work colleagues, and the douchebag from high school we're still friends with, and he can't spell your, and we can't hate these people. Hate makes us stupid. We can't hate them back, but we have to beat them. We have to beat them in a democracy. And Jesus can help us even if you don't believe in his divinity, because they're hiding behind this, and we got to take away their camouflage. And the media won't do it, and the Democratic Party is too scared to do it. So the people who actually know the Bible have to be able to. Right, but again, though media's not liberal. Media's terrified of being called liberal. No. Media's profit driven.
Yes, the media is profit driven. The Democrats, I say we have two parties in this country. One has no heart and one has no head.
Correct.
I don't think Democrats have the head for the fight.
The party of dicks and the party of dickless. Yes, I get you.
It.
But again,
so reach around the party that don't get it.
So it's going to be us. It's going to come to all of us winning this fight over dinner tables and debates and social media. And again, look at how many people have talked their parents and grandparents out of homophobia since the 90s. That wasn't politicians who did it, and it wasn't religious leaders who did it. It was ordinary people who pointed out that hating gay people has nothing to do with the values of Jesus, because it doesn't. And so I have a lot of faith that we can do it, as dark as it seems, because I think people deep down don't want to be hostile jerks. I think people want to be kind. And I think in many cases, we got to remind some of our fundamentalist loved ones what the foundational principles of this movement are, because maybe they need to find a new name for their shitty, mean little club.
Shitty, mean little club would work.
I call them grab 'em by the pussy evangelicals myself.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, boy. Good luck, Eric. Good luck showing this in a class. I hope you weren't planning on showing this to any media literacy.
I want to thank our guest. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
I just lost you tenure, Professor. I'm sorry. I may have just.
The problem is I don't have it yet. So.
Oh well, I may. Okay, well, I may have just lost the university's funding. In fact, ICE is outside right now.
Well, he is in Texas, so.
I mean, they've already hit a Texas State person. You're probably safe now, right? They got their one.
John, thanks. It's plug time for the listeners who didn't get enough of you here. Where can they get more?
Thank you. You're very indulgent. I'm not usually this prima donna-ish. Thank you. The book is called Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalist Fascists and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. My name's John Fugelsang. I anchor the primetime programming on Sirius XM's Progress channel. We're also a free podcast the next day called the John Fugelsang Podcast. And I have a Substack and all the socials. And thank you so much. I was so honored to come here. Especially considering your backgrounds and to talk about all of this. It's a really weird dialogue to have, especially from a comedian. And I really appreciate such a smart way to do it. So thank you.
Even though you knew Brian was going to be here,
as part of my parole, I have to do some work with Brian, and I'm not really allowed to talk about it too much. But I want to tell you, he's made a lot of progress, and I'm not here to drag him down, man. I want here to support Brian all the way.
My nipples are hard just hearing it.
There you go. See, that's
part of the
now.
lessons you learned in the
look, there's a lot of reasons Brian can't run a Cub Scout pack. It's not the time or the place. I'm here to do my own public service and try to help out. I'm just doing my
best.
Works
for me, bitches.
It keeps him back. It works if you work it, Brian. No, seriously, thank you. I love Mr. Karam. Mr. Karam's so good to me. It is on my show all the time.
Of course.
And it really is a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, John. Thank you. Thanks as well, of course, to Michael and Brian, who are here every week. Fiona, did you enjoy our guest today?
Absolutely. He's almost as brilliant and funny as you guys. To the listeners, as always, hit the like and subscribe. Until we meet again on another edition of Hard Pass, please be nice and be well.